Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Scott, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Balashondran. Mr. Hayes. Mr. Herndon.
Present.
Mr. Kasab.
Here.
Ms. Kristen Cootie.
Here.
Mr. Myers.
Present.
Mr. Portney.
Here.
Mr. Bernier.
Here.
Mr. Best.
Here.
Mr. Frank.
Here.
Ms. Mariner.
Here.
Ms. Trainer.
Here.
Mr. Heller.
Here.
Mr. Patterson.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Beck. Ms. Hartle. Ms. Perkins. Mr. Piper.
Here.
Mr. Cervello.
Here.
Mr. Hammeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hardin.
Here.
Mr. Lord.
Here.
Ms. Moriarty.
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Abrams.
Here.
Ms. Hycheski.
Here.
Mr. Magruder.
Present.
Ms. Robb.
Here.
And Ms. Whitman.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is new agenda items. Are there any new agenda items? Seeing none. Announcements. There was an executive session conducted by the General Forum on June 24th, 2024, tonight, to discuss a personnel matter. And while we're still under announcements, I would like to allow John Hayes, a new board member, to introduce himself.
Thanks, everyone. I apologize I can't be there in person for my first meeting. I had this trip planned before I actually joined the State College Council, but I look forward to meeting all of you in person and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is an employment agreement authorization. I guess I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the General Forum authorizes the Executive Committee to enter into an employment agreement with the next Executive Director as discussed in executive session. Further, the General Forum thanked the Executive Director Search Committee and COG Human Resources Director for their diligent work on this recruitment.
Second.
Whoop. Who?
Mr. Lord.
Mr. Lord, you seconded. Seconded it. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. It says it authorizes the executive committee to enter into an employment agreement. That has not taken place yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Not officially, no.
that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, motion second. Call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Dustin makes the motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Susan makes this second. Is there any discussion?
Yes. It looks as if some of the consent agenda can't be voted on by some municipalities or won't be.
Correct. We have two consent agendas tonight. One for all municipalities, and then the second would just be the participating municipalities in the refuse and recycling program.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
Copy that. And so perhaps if there's an opportunity to ask for unanimous consent, and therefore anybody that objects to any, and if there's no objections, it's automatically approved. So that might be an option to just getting through it, because motion versus two motions and approvals.
I'm not quite following you.
Meaning, as the chair, you can ask for unanimous consent, which means someone has to object in order for it to not be approved, but you don't need a motion and second for each of the different separate consent agenda items. I'm just recommending a very quick way to get
Okay.
through this.
Okay, well then I'll call for,
Mr. Chair, I'll just point it
Go ahead,
out.
Rich.
The second class vote requires an affirmative vote, so therefore you can't vote by.
There's no unanimous, okay.
You have.
Can't do unanimous.
It requires an affirmative.
okay, so I'll do it this way. Consent agenda, item 6, consent agenda number 1, all municipalities. And there's one consent agenda item, and it's approval of the minutes. The general form approved CA1 is listed on the June 24th, 2024 general form consent agenda number 1. Do I, we already have it. Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Number 7, consent agenda item number 2, refuse and recycling member municipalities. This consent agenda item deals specifically with member of understanding between Center Region COG and the CCRRA Second Amendment. Do I hear a motion to approve this consent agenda item?
This is Patty, so moved.
Do I see a second, or hear a second? Second by Dustin. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Okay, item number 8, proclamation 2024-4, proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month and July 19th, 2024 as Parks and Recreation Professionals Day. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll read the proclamation, then our Parks and Recreation Director has some comments to share. Proclamation 2024-4, recognizing July as Parks and Recreation Month and July 19th, 2024 as Parks and Recreation Professionals Day in the Center Region. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the Center Region, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health, wellness, and improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation programming, education activities, and out-of-school time programming, including youth sports and environmental education, are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, and attraction and retention of businesses and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas our Parks and Recreation natural resource areas ensure ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the Center Region Council of Governments, Center Region Parks and Recreation recognizes the benefits derived from Parks and Recreation resources and the immeasurable contributions made by Parks and Recreation professionals in our community. Now, therefore, the Center Region Council of Governments proclaims July as Parks and Recreation Month in the Center Region and July 19th as Parks and Recreation Professional Day, and encourages all residents to explore parks in the Center Region and to learn more about recreation programs at www.crpr.org.
Thank you, Eric. There's a motion, and I'll entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, you have a presentation. Sorry.
So I just want to read a few words about this celebratory moment for Parks and Recreation and professionals across our region. First, thank you for the opportunity to proclaim July as Parks and Recreation Month and July 19th as Parks and Recreation Professionals Day. Center Region Parks and Recreation honors these two important events to recognize the importance and value of parks and recreation in this community. Parks, trails, programs, events, and programs provide endless opportunities to gather, play, improve physical, mental, social, and emotional health. This year's theme, Where You Belong, celebrates the many ways that Parks and Recreation professionals across the country foster a sense of belonging in their community by providing welcoming and inclusive programming essential services for all ages and abilities, and safe, accessible places to build meaningful connections. Center Region Parks and Rec oversees 56 regional facilities to include the cooperative maintenance effort among the participating municipalities in the region and direct oversight over the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center, 2 community pools, an active adult senior center, Oak Hall, Hess, and Whitehall Road Regional Park. We celebrate and promote building vibrant, strong, resilient services through the power of Parks and Recreation and the power of our coordination and collaboration as a regional agency. Additionally, as part of Parks and Recreation Month, we're celebrating our Parks and Rec professionals on Friday, July 19th. Our agency employs close to 200 part-time, full-time individuals and over 800 volunteers to oversee roughly over 700 programs each year. We provide so many programs and services to our community to help create a healthy environment. We consider ourselves as the wellness hub to our community, and we just want to honor and recognize all of our staff and everyone here, including our Parks and Recreation committees, everyone that supports Parks and Recreation throughout the course of the year. We see the value as much as we think that you see the value, and our residents see the value in Parks and Recreation. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So there's a motion to make this proclamation. Someone want to make that motion and read it? Can you read it, Danny? Yeah.
The general form is recommended by the Executive Committee approve Proclamation 20-4, proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month and July 19th, 2024 as Parks and Recreation Professional Day in the Central Region.
Here, a second? Josh, a second? No, any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Next up is Resolution 2024-5, repealing and replacing Resolution 87-6, presented by Mr. Norberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the past month, in the preparation leading up to the appointment of the next executive director, our outside legal counsel that helps with human resources and labor relations issues reviewed and helped update the employment agreement that was proposed to the next executive director, and in doing so reviewed the articles of agreement, other documents including our personnel rules, and the resolution 87-6 that needs to be updated. Legal counsel noticed that there were inconsistencies and items that had been superseded by the later articles of agreement. So what's before you tonight for consideration is to repeal Resolution 87-6 and replace it with the resolution that's in your packet. I'll go through, listed on page 6 of your agenda are the key items that were changed. Section 1, creation of the office. No longer is it upgrading as it was before, but it now identifies the office of the executive director and references the responsibilities defined in the Articles of Agreement adopted in 2008, the Personnel Policy Handbook adopted in 2019, and the job description that was updated earlier this year. Next, in the appointment of the executive director, included the possibility in the future, if there was a need for recruitment, to use a search committee, and so that was updated, and the residency topic that was in that section has been removed and placed into a separate section, Section 3, which identifies the employment agreement for the executive director and lists a number of items that would be included in an employment agreement, such as compensation, benefits, retirement, general business expenses, removal of the executive director if necessary, severance package provisions, performance evaluation, residency requirements, et cetera. Those items are now identified as to be included in an executive director employment agreement. Powers and duties really don't change except for reference in 4.2 where has changed from the general form to the executive committee that would concur when the executive director has a recommendation to appoint or remove an agency director. Item 4.3 identifies the responsibilities for ensuring funds are expended in accordance with the approved budget, following purchasing policies, et cetera. And I think that's about it for section 4. Non-interference doesn't change. Compensation is referenced again in the employment agreement. Vacancy is updated to also mention that the executive director shall appoint an agency director to be the acting executive director when absent from the office, and the executive director deems it necessary to ensure the smooth operation of the COG. And then finally, Section 8 repeals the previous resolution. So this was presented and reviewed by the executive committee last week. They had a couple of edits which have been incorporated in this, and then the executive committee recommended its adoption. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Eric, I have just one, just for clarification.
Sure.
So this is something that we have to do in order to modify previous documents that we have in order for things to, for one to agree to with the other. Is that correct?
Well, it's to remove the inconsistency with more recently adopted documents like the Articles of Agreement.
And this is recommended by the legal counsel dealing specifically with human resource law and that kind of thing.
They recommended that we correct those inconsistencies, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I hear a motion to approve? Please read the motion.
This is Matt from Ferguson. I move that
The general forum, as recommended by the executive committee, adopts Resolution 2024-5 to update and replace Resolution 87-6 as approved by the general forum on August 24th, 1987.
Do I hear a second? Okay. Kevin? Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? None. Okay, the ayes have it. And next on the agenda is Regional Parks Loan Prioritization.
Good evening again. In front of you, you have some details regarding the project that was recently discussed for the Regional Parks Loan. As many of you know, there was an endorsement to utilize those loan funds in the amount of $237,696. What we have done as a next step is discuss this with the authority members. Back in May, they discussed the project at length, potential options within the CIP that would be a good project to use the funds for so that we could draw them down by June of 2025. So that discussion led to a unanimous vote and decision to move forward with a project that was already in the works, which is the pavilion project. As part of the original Phase 1 scope for Whitehall, this was an item that was originally removed during a de-scoping of the Phase 1 project. But funding was secured for this, as noted in your agenda. We actually have also had some conversations with a donor that was contributing toward irrigation. We have since moved that restricted $25,000 donation for irrigation to the pavilion project, giving us an additional $25,000 for that. So we believe there's some support there as well, and that we have the funding available to fit within the scope to be able to construct a pavilion, which was originally planned to be attached to the restroom facility out at Whitehall. We will be looking at something that is more detached, but in the same location, to provide enough shade and cover for picnic tables and for concessions at the park. We currently have very little shade. We have a lot of tree cover, but it's going to take some time to grow those trees. So shade is something we're really concerned about, especially with the All Abilities Playground and those with sensitivity to light. So there's a motion in your packet this evening with a request to utilize those loan funds for the pavilion and concession at Whitehall.
I move that the general forum is recommended by the Executive Committee, Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority, and is supported by the Finance Committee. Authorize the use of the remaining Regional Parks Loan Fund in the amount of $237,696 to be used for the construction of a pavilion with a concession at Whitehall Road Regional Park.
Do I hear a second?
Mr. Lord, if you would add not to exceed $500,000 at the end of that, I will second that motion.
Where are we getting $500,000?
Well, 2 paragraphs above, it says.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
There's a motion on the table. We need a second before we can have a discussion about it, but as far as this motion is concerned, as I understand it, it's a fixed amount of money. If there is no more money, this depletes the loan. Is that correct?
Yes,
This uses up the
$237,000 is the loan funds.
There is-
I'm asking for an amendment, a friendly amendment to his motion, so I can second it. I think that's well within,
Well, we would have to, as a forum, vote on amending the motion.
no, we don't. You do not have to amend on the motion, it doesn't have a second. I can ask for him to add a couple of words and second that.
And if he refuses,
He doesn't have, yeah, then I won't second. It's okay.
then, go ahead, Frank.
To your point though, but I don't think that there's 500,000 that's involved in this part of the motion. All this motion is doing is releasing the 237,696 loan balance. That's all we're doing.
Yeah, that's the
We're not authorizing them to go to 500, 600 or whatever. That's the project. All we're doing here is releasing those funds that are
The
left in the
remaining
loan.
funds in the loan, it's the loan balance.
That's my understanding of what we're looking
And it
at.
doesn't hurt anything to add, it doesn't.
You're adding something that doesn't mean anything.
Frank, would you like to second the motion?
What's that? I
Would
can't-
someone else like to second the motion?
Kevin said.
I'm sorry, I'm just,
I said, Kevin.
Kevin, go ahead. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I asked for that at the end, because I think the more that we can make sure that there's a budget, there's clarity amongst all of us, and some of us have said, oh, I thought we said something, that this is a $500,000 or less deal. And so I just wanted to get into this particular motion and probably every other motion thereafter, so that we can all get in our minds this is a $500,000 project, no more. That's it. And we don't,
Omar,
Is that a motion to amend?
it isn't.
Yeah.
he's making a motion to amend the
I did
motion,
not
Okay.
move any.
but we have a motion and a second.
Well, a motion to amend is subsidiary to that, and should be, if it's second, it should be decided first.
Okay?
I did not move anything. It's okay if we vote on your motion, sir. I was just simply, if this was discussion that the chair asked for.
Let me ask for clarification question. Are you, when you're saying 500,000, you're referring to the value of the project,
Correct.
not the loan
Correct.
amount that's being
The
released?
loan, yeah, yep.
And may I, if the agency were to obtain another $250,000 grant, this would prohibit us from taking that, because we're already up to 500,000. So we wouldn't be able to accept more money coming into the project from a donor, a grantee, or something like that.
The other thing is.
That's why I'm
Mr.
bothered
Chair,
by
if I
this limit.
Go ahead.
We currently have committed $412,000. That includes this $237,000. I say committed because that's what we've currently had either committed through grant funds or received from a private donor. We have remaining donor funds to receive from a private donor of $120,000. With that, it brings us to roughly $532,000. All of this information continues to move. As I said earlier, the irrigation funding for $25,000 was something that happened within the last 2 weeks. And so the estimate included in your agenda is just that. It's an estimate of $500,000, but we currently have at least pledged $532,000 currently. So I just wanted to clarify that.
But what we don't know yet is the actual cost of the project. We just have an estimate. Is that correct? So my concern would be, what happens if you set the amount, which is not typically done on projects, set the amount at 500,000 and the actual bids come in higher than that, then what happens at that point?
We would need to come back to anything that's not approved in the budget. We would need to come back for a budget amendment.
And so the budget is actually 500,000?
The
Is that a budget
500,000
number?
is just an estimated value of the current funding that's been pledged and committed for the project.
Okay. So, and 500,000 is just an estimate of the cost?
Correct.
So any increases, any amount over the 500,000? Is that or over the money you have? 536,000 or something like that? You would have to come back through the process to get approval to spend an additional amount of money, is that correct?
I would defer to Eric to maybe clarify that.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, Mr. Patterson has not made a motion, but I'd like to speak to, we're having, I guess, conversation a little bit now. I'd like to speak to that. I don't support a motion, but I understand clearly what Mr. Patterson's talking about. He's wants to keep in front of, at present in our minds, the total cost of the project so that we don't start spending money that we may not have, or keep it in front of our faces in the future so that we're aware of it. I think that's the main point, not to put words in your mouth, but that's what I'm getting. So that's well taken. I'm a little concerned that if we put a cap on it and something changes, but your point is well taken, that we keep our eye on where we are now and what the budget is, and not spin out of control. That was your point?
Yeah, the moment it got moved and seconded, I just wanted to clarify exactly what you succinctly kind of also said. And we want to just keep it in our minds about this number and not kind of come back 2 months later and 600,000 because we found some,
It's very much appreciated. Tracy, you have a question?
I have a comment and a question. I had a problem with this project from the very beginning. I understand why maybe you think we should do this project, but I guess my problem with it is we've talked about a year-round pavilion. We've talked about not a year-round or a three-season pavilion. We've talked about the possibility of renting this out. This seems like a lot of money, and nobody has ever presented any business plan for this. Nobody has ever presented who's going to rent this, or who's going to do this, or who's going to run the concession stands. I've heard nothing about who's going to clean it if we do a sticky. How is it going to be heated? What are these costs associated with this? And what is this going to suck out of us in the long run? And how are we doing this? I mean, sure, $500,000, but what's it going to cost us then on top of that as the time comes? I've heard nothing about this. And I guess that's where my question is where's the business plan on this? How do we know this is going to be something that isn't just sucking us dry in the long run? I mean, I just remember the budget. The budget we had, I was looking at, what was it, last year? But we had negative concessions. What is that? Are we planning on, do we have a plan? Do we know what we're doing? I haven't heard that. All I hear is that we're spending money. And I guess I just want to hear more about that.
Sure. So this project is something that I'm bearing from previous directors, project managers from Phase 1. This is something that was originally part of the Phase 1 scope, and so it was evaluated and determined as a need, and the authority, I know, also discussed it. Parks Capital most likely would have discussed it. This is prior to my time as well, and those of you new in the room, that this was originally part of Phase 1 and always planned to be an amenity that was needed and essential for the park, for the types of use, for the tournaments, for the general population of people visiting the park, to have a place to picnic, to have a place to get out of the sun and into the shade. What I have tried to do in relooking and evaluating this was removing the all-season pavilion component of it and removing all of the final finishes that are going to cost a lot more. Just to be able to simply provide a picnic pavilion that's enclosed for those purposes solely. And so we're trying to work within a reasonable budget so that we do not need to come back and request a lot of additional funding, understanding the budgetary constraints that each of you have. But also, this is a project that currently has funding and was currently evaluated and discussed and prioritized at the time, but it was eliminated as an amenity due to funding restrictions.
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, but it also says in here that a prefabricated three-season pavilion concession fully enclosed with the option to add heating elements in the future. That means we're looking at a year-round. And I guess I still have that question. Did anybody bother to take a look at, what we'd be doing with this? I mean, like I said, where's more of the business plan for something like this? Does anybody ask questions about who would be renting this or what we would be doing with this?
Sure. So the heating element is something that is just a future thought. If we ever wanted to heat the facility, we would be able to potentially do that. But again, that would be a cost that we need to consider. We need to consider costs for staffing it as well as costs for all the electric that would come along with it as well. So we have thought about what those costs would be. I don't have a formal presentation of that right now in a business plan format, but the authority has discussed, kind of the depth of what this project would be and what are potential options in the future should we want to heat the facility. We may have the ability to do that.
I have a question. As a disinterested third party, but maybe helpful, or may help with this, with understanding. This, you have an estimated value, an estimated cost for this project, right? You have a certain amount of dollars that you have accumulated to date or have available to date.
Yeah.
And this would add another $296,000. Do you have a program plan or a design concept or schematics or anything for this particular project that would explain what it would do, what its value would be, et cetera? Do you have that yet?
We have design drawings that were originally included in the phase one, but the design is for a building with garage doors and some things that just are not needed. But we have an overall footprint of what this building would be and a location for it.
So you're trying to secure funding then prior to going forward and trying to figure out what exactly you want to do. You wanted to make sure, I guess, that there was funds available. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I just have one more question, if
Go
I may.
ahead.
Just one more, and I'm done. Do you have an estimated income for what this facility will bring? Has that been mentioned or thought about at all?
I don't have those numbers in front of me tonight for this evening, but we can certainly provide you with some estimates. In general, our tournament last weekend was a pretty big tournament. We took in roughly $3,500 for the concession stand over 2 days, just as a general.
And do you know the cost of that concession stand as well?
I don't have that off the top of my head, no.
I'd kind of like to have those numbers at some point, just get an idea of how we're doing things. If that's okay.
I got a question, Ron.
Go ahead.
With respect to the construction of this and the anticipated opening of the park, how do they mesh with respect to causing disruption of what we're going to be opening? I know what you're talking about because we walked the park. Logistically, how do they fit so we don't end up disrupting a major section?
I don't see this interfering with opening the park. I mean, if we decide to construct this pavilion, we're gonna have to put some fencing around that
Okay.
construction area, but I don't see it interfering. Maybe some interference here and there with the location of the restrooms and whatnot, but I don't see this being a major implication, no.
It's not a very large area where you're putting it. So
No.
it's gonna be sort of tight to make sure you get it done
Right,
without encroaching on the road
right.
into the parking lot. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion?
What's the urgency of passing this right now?
The current regional parks loan is good through June of 2025. So the $237,000 needs to be spent down at that time, by then. So there's a time constriction on, or time restriction on those funds.
Right, and if I could add, in addition to that time sequence that Chrissy just mentioned, staff is in the process of preparing the budget for 2025 and knowing the comfort and whether these funds will be released by the general forum, she will be better able to prepare a budget that will go through the review process for regional parks in August and early September. If you caught all of that.
I did, and I didn't hear any of it. There was this loud noise to my right. I couldn't. I heard everything. No, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thanks.
Okay. Okay, are there? Oh, I'm sorry, Josh, you had.
Parks Capital, and I was watching Parks Capital from last year, and this was an item that they discussed, and I think that they talked about it being not only self-sustaining, but concession stands typically, there was a discussion, I remember watching this meeting, that concession stands typically make more money than the operating costs. So like, even after you pay out people, you know, the hot dog doesn't cost $3 to make, it costs about 25 cents to make. So they talked about how the profits will actually pay for some of it back. So in the end of the day, it is a good capital expense. That's why I support it. And it was before my time, but I think it's something that we should continue moving forward on. What?
It was negative last year.
What with
Okay.
The concession,
well, that's because we don't have a finalized park yet, I don't
negative.
think.
That's why I want to make sure that there's a plan moving forward.
Oh, the other ones. I mean, I think that this park is going to be, we talked about how it's like the newest thing, and all the events, like the events that we're going to do are going to bring in people that are going to make it not negative.
Well, I guess the thing is, coming from a restaurant background, there is a formula.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure that, we're not in the negative again.
Yeah.
Okay,
no,
excuse me, I have someone else that has a question. So Matt, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, just thinking about this whole thing, parks, I don't think we're operating them as money-making ventures. If we wanted to, we could charge for parking, right? We could charge for every car that parks in the parking lot, but we build these parking lots, the cars park in them for free. I think we're building this as a public service, and hopefully, if we're running concessions, it does bring money in. But the real point of it is to serve the public and to be a place, for people to come and recreate. And so, I'm not super concerned on will this make money, because I don't view this as a profit-driven enterprise. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Frank?
And I can't believe that Rich should be, this is not, this $237,000 is at what, 1.2%, 1.5%? We will never get money at this rate again. So we have 1 year to use this money, and at 1% or 1.5%, we should do this. This is a no-brainer. Because if we go to get it next year, because we need that 237, it's not going to be at 1.5%. So that's something to keep in mind when you're voting here.
To expand on that,
Go ahead.
we don't have to pay it back till 2031.
There you go, that's the other part of the equation.
So that is what they usually call as free money.
I can't believe you let me beat you to that.
I knew you would.
Go ahead, Kevin.
The other thing I think we don't want to lose sight of, and I did the walkthrough too, through the park, and the shade issue is a huge issue. So this is going to solve that problem. I look at it as a safety issue for the elderly, handicapped, etc. There is nowhere for them to go other than maybe the restrooms to obtain shade. So I agree with the 1%, it just makes sense to do this and move forward. And I'd look at it more as a safety issue than I do concessions. That's it.
Any other comments? We have a motion and a second. And we've had plenty of discussion, so I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next on our agenda is the university report. Mr. Julian Morales.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'll keep this light and fairly short. I only have a couple updates. One is exciting time on campus as we started, our summer session 2 will start on Wednesday, officially start on Wednesday. We did have students moving in yesterday into today. We'll continue tomorrow as well. So these are first year students who are starting their college journey now. Summer session 2 will run through August 7th, and then there'll be a little short break, and then the fall semester will then begin the following week. So campus is busy. The other thing wanted to mention is Ag Progress Days, scheduled for August 13th through August 15th as well. At this moment, that's all I have. So if there's any questions or anything I could help with. No? Okay. Thank you.
State College Area School District report. Is there someone here? No. All right, then we'll move on to Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder that immediately following this meeting, we will have the Run, Hide, Fight training taking place right here in the General Forum Room. If anybody needs to take a quick bathroom break, you can do so while CNET quickly tears down. And if you haven't seen Scott for your program plan, or if he hasn't gotten to you to give you a hard copy of the program plan as requested, then you can do that during the break as well. In your packet is the June activity report. I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of the items in the activity report. And Jonathan Risley is online, and he oversaw the MASH casualty event at the airport. That we have a number of photos in there from some of your guest actors from the COG team as well. But if there are no questions on the activity report, we can move right ahead to a couple of agency directors' reports, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
First up, we have Sean Kaufman.
Okay, real quick report update on our ISO rating that came in last month. Pleased to report that we were able to maintain our ISO rating, and for those of you that have no idea what I mean by ISO rating, it's a independent evaluation of our program by the Insurance Services Office. And basically, insurance companies use that information to help determine what the value of somebody's homeowner's insurance is, particularly the fire protection portion of it. So they do this evaluation every 5 years. And so it's kind of a way to judge our programs and determine whether or not we're providing the appropriate service to our communities. We maintained from our last rating, these are the 4 items within the evaluation that they look at. So the first one says needed fire flow. And first off, I don't expect this group to understand anything I'm talking about. The report is in your agenda packet. You can go into the details. But when I talk about needed fire flow from the fire side, when you look at a property like this COG building, we can determine with a formula, if it is on fire, how much water I need to put it out. Okay, so that's what needed fire flow is. The emergency communication component, that has everything to do with from the time you dial 911 until the time the fire department is dispatched to the call. And the ability for the 911 communication center to communicate with the fire department. The third part where we have the most input or the most ability to change our rating is in equipment, staffing, training, what is the geographic area of our operation, and then what is the community risk reduction that we have in place. And when we talk about community risk reduction, that is the effort between the fire company and our codes administration to do public education. So when we're out there doing public education events like this past weekend when we had our vehicle at the Parks Touch a Truck, or if we're doing an open house, or if the codes office has their safety trailers doing fire extinguisher training, all that goes into community risk reduction. And then the last thing is the water supply that a community has available to them. So we deal with State College Borough Water Authority and College Township Water Authority, as well as the Rock Springs Water Authority in our primary, what is the Alpha's primary first due area. This doesn't include Harris and Half Moon Townships. So they're looking at what's the available water in our communities as well. So this is the rating scale. And this year our rating came in at 82.91. It puts us in a class 2. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Our last rating 5 years ago in 2019 was just at 80.61. So we gained a couple points. The reason we gained those points was the staffing that this group approved. They included in the rating scale this year the forward pay positions between the code office and the fire program. So they got added in, even though they weren't hired yet, because of the approval of this group of that program. They got added into the scale. So what they call our classification rating is a 2/2Y. And it's a split classification because we have some areas that are within 5 miles of a fire station and also have a credible water supply. But we also have protect areas that are further than 5 miles from a fire station, or are 5 miles from a fire station but do not have a credible water supply. So that's why we have this split rating. And the second bullet there is what I'm most proud about, is that 2Y classification is a special recognition of superior level of fire protection in an otherwise class 9 area. A class 9 area would be considered unprotected, meaning that they don't have water and they don't have an adequate response from a fire department. But it's designed to represent a fire protection delivery system that's superior except for the lack of water. So in this case, that's what I'm kind of most proud about, is that we are able to meet that rating even in areas that we don't have water supply. When you look at the distribution of grades across the country, that again shows that our class 2 rating puts us in a superior classification. Less than 2,500 fire departments across the country have a rating of 2 or higher, and very few are class 1. Class 1 basically would be a small urban area with a career fire department that has ample water supply. That's a very smaller number across the nation. So we're pretty happy with that. So again, I want you to take the time in your agenda packet, maybe if you're really interested, look through that report. It doesn't change anything from our previous rating. We were a 2Y during our last rating in 2019. We had just recently got bumped up from a 3Y at our previous one. So it's important that we keep improving. Prior to that, we were a 4. So we're making progress with developing a fire program that's superior, and we're really kind of proud about that. So as my first evaluation in ISO, I was really happy that we were able to maintain that rating. So I wanted to share that with you. If anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer. Great, thank you.
Next up, Chris. Okay, Chris.
Okay, so I have a really quick report on Whitehall. The agency met with Ferguson Township last week to review the final punch list items in preparation for final inspections. Minor alteration plans are being reviewed by their staff. All fence posts have been installed since our last meeting. Several items require Mother Nature to do her job and are on hold until early fall. This includes replacing trees and establishing grass in a couple of the stormwater basins. A few areas were reworked and seeded a few weeks ago, and the agency continues to anticipate a late summer, early fall opening.
Thank you. Okay, move on to our authority, board, and committee reports. First up, executive committee. Mr. Thompson.
Nothing further to add. Just thank everyone for your support of moving the executive director search forward tonight.
Finance committee, Mr. Frank.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair, pending any questions.
Any questions? Human Resources Committee did not meet. Parks Capital Committee did not meet. Public Safety Committee did not meet. Facilities Committee.
Mr. Chair, nothing beyond what's outlined in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernier. Land Use and Community Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Hamleister. Thank you, Mr. Hamleister. Climate Action Sustainability Committee.
Ms. Whitman has informed me to say nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
And Parks and Rec Governance Special Committee did not meet. SCLO Center Region Library Board. Thank you. Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority. Thank you. The EM Council meeting for May 28th was canceled, and there were no agenda items required immediate attention. Okay. Other business. Let's see here. I don't think there's, I guess the next motion is, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned.